He drives 40 minutes on a Saturday morning to look at a car he will not buy. He already knows this. The seller knows this too, probably. The car sits in a stranger's driveway outside Detroit or Dallas or somewhere in Tennessee. It doesn't matter. What matters is the garage light flickering on, the shape underneath the old cotton cover, and the specific way his breathing changes before the cover comes off. He is 61 years old. He owns 3 cars. He does not need this one. He reaches out and touches the rear quarter panel before anyone has said a single word. That gesture is not about the car. It never was. To understand what is actually happening in that driveway, you have to go back, not to any single moment, but to an entire atmosphere. America in the early 1960s had made a specific promise to a specific generation. Work hard, stay loyal, build a family, and the good life will follow. For the children growing up in those years, that promise arrived wrapped in very particular packaging. Suburban lawns freshly cut on Saturday mornings, television sets glowing in living rooms, drive-in movies on Friday nights, and somewhere in the background, always slightly out of reach, the shape of a machine that seemed to belong to a different America entirely. On April 17, 1964, Ford did not introduce a car. They introduced a symbol. The Mustang was launched not at an auto show, at the World's Fair in New York City. That detail matters. Ford had set a target of 100,000 cars for the entire first year. On the first day alone, 22,000 Mustangs were ordered. America did not wait overnight. It did not think about it. It did not comparison shop. It simply reached out and said yes. That same week, the Mustang appeared simultaneously on the covers of both Time and Newsweek. That actually happened. This was not automotive news. This was American news. A boy of 12 living in a tract house in Ohio or Georgia or somewhere outside Chicago might have seen it on the evening news that night. The car looked like freedom looked like. Long hood, short deck, a fastback roofline that suggested motion even standing completely still. Rally red, Wimbledon white, vintage burgundy. These were not just colors, they were personalities. When you chose a color, you were choosing an identity. And here is the detail that separated the Mustang from everything else on every American road at that moment. It cost $2,368. A school teacher could buy one. A factory worker could buy one. A young man saving his first paychecks could buy one. This was not a car for the wealthy. This was a car for anyone who believed the American road belonged to them. Within 1 year of launch, Wilson Pickett recorded Mustang Sally. A car that appears in a hit song within 12 months of its introduction is no longer just a car. It has become culture. It has become language. It has become the kind of thing a 12-year-old boy hears on the radio and files somewhere he cannot explain. And then, in 1968, Steve McQueen drove a Highland green Mustang fastback through the hills of San Francisco in a movie called Bullet. That chase scene did not feel like entertainment to the boys watching it. It felt like permission. Permission to want something that fast, something that real, something that honest about what it was. The Tiffany Gold Medal for Excellence in American Design had already confirmed what everyone already knew. This was not just a machine. This was an idea America had about itself. The boy filed it somewhere, deep. Children of that era were raised inside a particular emotional economy. Fathers who had survived the Depression and lived through World War II did not discuss feelings as a category of importance. You showed love through provision. You showed strength through silence. A father lifting the hood of a car on a Sunday afternoon, saying nothing, just pointing, just showing, was a form of teaching that neither party would have named as love, but it was. Objects carried emotional weight because direct emotional expression often did not. This is the first layer of what classic Mustang collecting is actually about. The car was encoded early, during a period of formation. Inside an emotional register the collector may never have fully examined. The 12-year-old who saw that Mustang on television did not just see a car. He saw a horizon, a version of adulthood that looked like open highways and self-determination and complete escape from the specific smallness of the world he was currently living in. Then something happened. He grew up, and America changed around him. The 1970s were a psychological earthquake for this generation. The decade that had been promised as a continuation of American progress instead delivered assassinations, Vietnam, Watergate, and gas lines that stretched around entire city blocks. The Clean Air Act of 1970 forced emissions controls onto engines that had been built for pure performance. Insurance costs climbed until the muscle car became financially impossible for the young men who had wanted it most. The CAFE regulations of 1978 quietly finished what the oil embargo had started. And then Ford did something that this generation never fully forgave. In 1974, they introduced the Mustang II. Same name, smaller body, weaker engine. A car built not for the open road, but for the gas station line. The men who had grown up watching the original Mustang as a symbol of American freedom now watched Ford put that same name on something that felt like a complete surrender. It was not just a disappointing car, it was a broken promise. The institutions had done it again. The corporation that was supposed to understand what the Mustang meant had traded that meaning away for fuel economy numbers. For young men in their 20s and 30s during this period, watching certainty dissolve into anxiety created a specific psychological residue. A hunger for things that were solid, things that were honest, things that did exactly what they said they would do. A 1968 Mustang Fastback did not lie to you. It did not restructure. It did not downsize. It did not send you a letter explaining that circumstances had changed. You turned the key, the engine answered, every single time, with a mechanical directness that felt almost moral in a decade that had completely lost its morality. Ownership was not available to everyone, but aspiration was free. And aspiration deferred has a very particular psychological effect. It compounds. Then something shifted. America wanted to feel proud again, and in 1987, Ford gave it a reason. The Mustang 5.0, a 225 horsepower V8 in a car that cost less than $12,000. That engine note, that specific sound at idle, low, settled, completely unhurried, like something that knew exactly what it was and had absolutely nothing to prove. For the men who had grown up watching the original Mustang and then spent the entire 1970s watching it be diminished and apologized for, the 5.0 was not just a car. It was confirmation that the thing they had believed in had not been wrong, that the original feeling had been real, that America could still build something that meant something. The garage on Sunday afternoons became serious again. Fathers who had stored away memories of 1965 fastbacks and 1967 Shelby GT 350s started making phone calls, placing classified ads in the back pages of local newspapers, driving out to farms on the edge of the city to look at cars sitting under tarps in barns. The prices were still reasonable. The original cars were still findable. And a Shelby GT 500 that had once sat forgotten in a garage for 15 years was not a neglected machine. It was a question waiting to be asked again. The man writing the check was on some level completing something the 12-year-old boy had started, watching World's Fair coverage on a black-and-white television set in a kitchen in Ohio. Psychologists who study collecting behavior return repeatedly to the concept of the personal fable, the private narrative a person builds about who they are and what their life means. Objects become chapters in that narrative. They serve as external evidence of an internal story. The serious Mustang collector is not simply preserving automotive history, though he may tell you that. He is preserving a version of himself. The correct Wimbledon white paint on a 1965 coupe is not an aesthetic preference. It is a detail from a chapter he lived a long time ago. The correct pony interior, the correct date-coded carburetor, the original window sticker if it survived. The specificity matters, because specificity is how memory holds meaning. Here is what most people misunderstand about this behavior. They see the money spent and assume the motivation is status. They see the climate-controlled storage units and the numbers-matching documentation and the forum arguments about correct date-coded parts, and they diagnose it as obsession or excess or arrested development. These readings are not entirely wrong, but they miss the primary mechanism entirely. The collecting is an attempt at coherence. A life contains many selves across many decades, and most of them are simply lost. The cars are a technology for recovering them. The reason he drives 40 minutes to look at a car he will not buy is not irrationality, it is practice. The ritual of evaluation, checking the VIN plate, reading the door data tag, listening to how the engine settles at idle, examining whether the panel gaps are original or the result of a careless repaint somewhere in the 1980s. This is a form of attention that the rest of modern life almost never demands. In that driveway, for those 30 minutes, nothing else is happening. There is no ambient anxiety about next month, no fragmented attention pulled toward a notification, no half-finished thought interrupted by something that felt urgent and turned out to mean nothing. There is only a machine and the accumulated knowledge required to understand it completely. This is what the collector is actually purchasing when he eventually does write the check, not the object, the state the object produces. That state has a name in psychological literature. It is called flow, complete absorption, the ratio of challenge to skill in perfect balance. Mustang restorers, particularly those rebuilding rather than simply acquiring, describe the experience in language that sounds almost meditative. Hours disappear. The mind quiets. Problems that resist language suddenly feel approachable. The thing that was keeping you awake at 3 a.m. somehow looks completely different after 4 hours under a hood with your hands covered in grease. Then, in 2006, something unexpected happened. A teenage boy sat in a movie theater and watched a half-built 1967 Mustang Fastback come back to life on a screen. In Tokyo Drift, Sean Boswell and his father pulled that car from storage on an army base. They rebuilt it together, piece by piece, in a garage, with tools on the floor and not many words spoken between them. And that scene did not feel like fiction to millions of people watching it. It felt like a memory. Because somewhere in America, in a real garage, that exact story had already happened 1,000 times. A father, a son, a fastback up on jack stands, the specific silence of two people doing something together that neither one of them knew how to say out loud. A new generation discovered the classic Mustang not through a magazine their father brought home, not through a song on the radio, not through a movie chase scene on a Sunday afternoon television, but through a theater screen in 2006 and filed it somewhere, deep, exactly the way the 12-year-old had in 1964. This is also why the community matters so deeply. Mustang clubs, Sunday morning car shows in empty parking lots across every American city, The early internet forums of the late 1990s, where men in their 50s wrote long, careful paragraphs about correct Autolite carburetor specifications and argued respectfully about the difference between Wimbledon White and vintage Burgundy. These spaces offered something the broader culture had largely stopped providing: a room where deep knowledge was genuinely respected, where expertise earned something immediate and real. Not a title, not a performance review, just the quiet acknowledgement of people who knew what knowing something completely actually felt like. The post-war generation was raised to believe that mastery mattered. By the 1990s, much of professional life had drifted toward management and abstraction and the coordination of other people's work rather than the direct exercise of skill. The garage became the last place where knowing something with your hands, in real time, still counted for everything.
What looks from the outside like an expensive hobby is from the inside a complete psychological ecosystem. And here is the realization that changes how you see all of it. The car sitting under that cotton cover in that stranger's driveway is not a car. It is a question this man has been asking since he was 12 years old, in the only language available to him, about what it means to understand something fully, to care for it faithfully, to build something with your hands that does not lie, and does not leave, and does not need you to explain yourself. To be, slowly, without performance, without audience, without explanation, completely and entirely himself. The Mustang is just what the question happens to look like.